Hello. Kraig Smyth here, MyBizGuide, and another edition of Disengage from Linear Mindset. Why? Because it's important. Because we're connected to everything, and everything's connected to us, and everything affects us, and we affect everything. So, today's topic is value. Value and addiction. It seems to be a little hiccup in contemporary society, as business minded as everybody is about what value is. So, money, printed currency, cannot reflect value in everything, cannot accurately reflect value in everything. For classic example, food, water, air. When we try to commoditize these things, when we try to put a price on these things, the printed currency is just not able to reflect those values. Those values are too high. They're beyond the scope of the usefulness of that tool. That tool being money, printed currency. Now, nothing against money again. Let's not get on that. Money facilitates trade. It's easier to carry around than 50 pounds of dried salmon and 10 pretty rocks, whatever. Money itself facilitates trade. Yes, people can misuse money just like they misuse and abuse everything else. But the point is to understand the limits of our tools. So money cannot reflect the value of everything. It can only reflect the value of some things, maybe even a lot of things. But it's critical, maybe even critical to the survival of our species, that we understand those limits, the limits of the usefulness of our tools, like money. And again, the recap on the money cannot accurately reflect the value of things such as food, water, shelter, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. Those things are beyond the scope of money's ability to reflect value. Okay, another example of value. The clock. Now, the clock is not time. That's a word attributed. But actual time is very fluid. A clock cannot reflect value of some things. The clock and that tool cannot reflect the value of urgency. If there's a life and death situation, if there's we need to react now, a clock cannot reflect that. A clock cannot reflect now. Also, understand that a clock is probably the only thing in existence that travels in a linear straight line. So nothing else does that. Seasons don't do that. Nothing lives by that clock. Kind of getting off on another issue with the clock, but that's, it's disengaged from linear mindset. So if our lifestyles are fixated on a clock, well, that's not consistent with everything else around us. So how does that affect us? And those are some of the things that we want to address as our species evolves, or at least tries. So again, that clock is a man-made item that reflects a constant, which very useful. Right now it's cloudy. I can't see the sun. It's hard to tell exactly what time it is, right? So the clock's useful, but it's limited. It's limited, especially when it comes to these important things, just like the money. They lose its limitation when there's things that are essential to human well-being. And that's probably some form, that's a natural occurrence, because at our core, we need to be able to live instinctually. We need to be able to think outside the realms of money and time. When we lose that ability, then we cross over into addiction. When our tools, when we try to use our tools beyond their scope, beyond their limitations, that's when we cross over into addiction. When our tools become crutches, when we try to assign a monetary value to everything, when everything has a time quotient, those are using man-made systems to try to fit everything in the man-made box. But man, and human I should say, is not the only organism here. It's a part of the natural system. So to understand the limits of these tools is critical to our species' well-being and the well-being of other species. So the addiction, I'm going to touch on the addiction factor a little bit more. That's a stereotypical thing when the tools become crutches, when people try to overuse their tool, use/abuse, right? It's the abuse of the tool where it becomes problematic, when people fail to see the limitations of the usefulness of that tool. In this instance, we're talking about money and the clock. I'm not saying time because it's not time, it's a clock. Big difference. When people try to use money for everything to solve all their problems, when everything is within the constraint of time, that's when people become addicted. When people can't live, when people can't react, when people can't think outside the constraints of money or clocks or drugs or alcohol or food or whatever. If people get themselves constrained, when people sacrifice their awareness for their perceived comfort, that's the addiction. Instead of saying, oh, you know what, this money really doesn't reflect this value accurately, when time is really not applicable here, but I'm going to use it anyway. You know, when I'm going to drink another cup of coffee to stay awake instead of just going to sleep, which I know we're sacrificing the awareness, sacrificing that instinctual awareness of maybe, you know, this isn't quite right, and taking a step back and looking at for what it really is. That's addiction. It's like the classic examples that our society is used to now, drug and alcohol. When someone thinks that drugs are going to fix their problems, you know, and I can't function if I'm not doing A, B, C, or D drug. Alcohol, same thing, you know. It's going to make it better. I can make it better doing this. Is that delusion that the addict tells themselves. I can still do this. I can use this. And they're actually abusing it at that time, despite all the signs that they're creating harm to themselves, things around them. It's not really working. Still trying to monetize food, water, air. Still sacrificing things for food, water, air for money. It's addiction. It's addiction. Saying that, oh, well, trying to put a timeline. How long do we have till we really screw up the planet? Beep, wrong answer. That whole thing's wrong. Time does not accurately reflect that. That is just another level of a life and death situation. That time's now. That time's always now. There's not too much we can do to take care of these things. There's not too much we can do to take care of ourselves, to take care of the planet, to grow, to get back on track. There's no time limit. There's no 12 years. There's no 20 years. That's a delusion. That's a perpetuated delusion from addicts, everybody living in their own delusions, addicted to clocks, money, these kind of things. I like to say our species is never going to buy or legislate itself into the future. So let's not trade our instincts for prefab conceptions of what we'd like. You know, reality and nature is. Observing nature is what actually happens versus what we want to happen. Two different things. So, haven't done a video in a while. Thought this was an important concept to reiterate again. And I got a couple more coming up, but just wanted to lay this out real quick. With that, hope everybody is having a good day. Take care of yourselves. Disengage from linear mindset. Don't let anyone tell you different. Stop being addicts. Have a good day.